What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Today for PvP Monday, we're going to be talking about an RTA concept, which is going to be first pick and second pick. Which one do I think is stronger, and how you should approach whether you're first or second, and the different strategy that actually does go into that, because believe it or not, RTA does have some strategy attached to it. So if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and join the Discord server, link in the description. As well as there's a topic you want me to cover for PvP Mondays, kind of similar to the breaking down the Guild Wars defenses from last week. If you want me to do that for more Guild Wars defenses, if you want to do more arena defenses, or if you even want to do more RTA concepts and match analysis, let me know in the comments. Without further ado, let's get right into it. As a quick aside, you may have noticed that I'm not uploading as much or streaming as much. That is because it has been quite a few busy weeks. I do hope to get a better schedule for you guys so that I can start uploading more regularly and more consistently and all of that good stuff. And I've probably been playing a little bit too much Xenoblade. But with that aside, hopefully I'm able to figure out my schedule and be able to manage all those things well so I can get those videos out for you. But enough of that, let's actually jump right into the video. As always, there will be sections for you to skip around if there's a certain thing you want to look at. As far as how the video will break down is, first we'll talk about the first pick, second pick system. Then we'll actually talk about how you play each one, and then which one I think personally is going to be stronger than the other one, because I really do feel that this season in particular, there is a stronger one, and I think it's going to be the first pick if you get first pick. But with that, let's actually go right into it. So I will be using some analysis and examples later on, but what is the first pick and second pick? Before you even get into a match of RTA, even before you pre-ban a unit, you know if you're going to get first pick or second pick. Why that particularly matters is because of how the priority works. As someone who gets first pick, you're guaranteed to get a unit that is uncontested unless the unit is pre-banned, right? It's a very powerful position because you're able to secure a very strong unit for your own account, and you're able to get that initial unit secured. On the other hand, we have the second pick that, while they may not get that early priority to the strongest unit in the game or to the main core unit in the strategy, they do get to pick two units, which does allow you to build a core early on for the team that you're trying to play. So for example, if you're someone that wants to secure a Cleave team, you're easily able to get Ran and Polides right here. Or if you're someone that plays Bruiser, you can pick a Ravi and another Bruiser unit right here. Or if you're someone that doesn't want to commit fully to Cleave and doesn't want to commit fully to Bruiser, you can also pick a Ravi and the other really strong unit that the opponent will then not be able to respond. So the last thing that second pick also has the access to is going to be the last pick. The thing about the last pick is that you already know the opponent's full draft before you actually get that last pick, which can be very powerful because you get the final say on what your draft will be. Ideally, you will pick a last pick that is forcing the opponent to ban that unit, or that completely finalizes your draft and makes your draft a lot stronger to be able to actually win that fight. So to kind of summarize, essentially, first pick gets priority to the unit right away and also gets to see more of the core of the opponent. And then as far as second pick, the second pick gets to start their team core earlier, so they're able to pick a lot more units than the opponent, but they don't get the number one priority. But they also do get the last pick to try to force the opponent to ban and to finalize their draft, because the opponent cannot respond to the last pick. That's actually going to be the primary difference between first pick and second pick. Now, as far as to how should you be playing the first pick and the second pick? If you're someone that is getting the first pick, your main priority is to secure the strongest units possible, as well as try not to give your opponent too much information, right? And that's why you often will see the best unit, of course, right now being Celius for first pick, is a very common first pick, and what's making first pick so strong. And if you see most of my games where I did get first pick, I usually was picking Celius, right? And I do lose occasionally with Celius, right? It's not like a first pick guarantees you the loss. But again, it is really nice to be able to secure that unit, right? Because it's a very strong unit right now that if the opponent did not pre-ban, you basically get priority over, right? That is very, very strong. So what you want to do is pick the strongest unit. Units that can very easily go in here in this first pick slot are going to be things like Celius, who is very highly contested and is a very strong unit. Mediator Cowick, who again is another very strong unit and a really good option if you don't have Celius, just because he's also a very good team core unit and can also pivot to different drafts. And another option, if Celius is banned and if you don't have Mediator Cowick, is going to be Apocalypse Ravi. Because Apocalypse Ravi, again, is a very general unit. If you're first picking Apocalypse Ravi, the opponent does not have too much units to actually be able to to know what you're going to do, right? You can go into a cleave, you can go into a bruiser team, you can go into a tank team, right? It does not give that much information. Same with Celia's, same with Mediator Coward. It does not give the opponent enough information to be able to counter you with their initial first picks. Another really good unit for this slot, of course, is also going to be Rimuru, again, because he's so general. He's a DPS hero that's really good for anti-cleaving, really good for aggro drafts, really good for bruisers, really good for everything, right? So these are the type of units that you want to get as a first pick unit. Of course, picking the higher priority units and knowing that your opponent is going to answer. The second part that you want to do as someone who is playing the first pick is to not give too much information and be able to pivot your draft, right? In this match, I did end up losing, but I played the first pick and second pick decently well, right? I first picked Celia's, they countered with two very meta units. Right here, I actually made a mistake. I take it back. I made a small mistake in this scenario because instead of going for another DPS type option in this situation, I actually went with Fallen Cecilia, which actually locked me into going into a bruiser type draft, right? Why is that particularly a problem? I was worried that they picked Fallen Cecilia, but the problem of me locking Fallen Cecilia here is that I'm forced to take a tankier draft and I can't really cleave because I'm not going to have the proper setup for a cleave. On the other hand, if I had picked a DPS hero here, I could easily have gone Ran Caesarea as the last option. So let's say here, I picked Briarwitch Caesarea, right? If I had rather than Briarwitch Caesarea, the opponent would pick Belian and Stene, and I could immediately here switch to a Ran and an Ida, right? And now the opponent does not have the tools necessary to protect themselves against that cleave, and I would have been able to cleave. So right here, I made a mistake of locking myself too early, right? So as a first pick, you don't want to lock yourself too early to a particular draft whenever you do have that first pick present. Right here, you see the same thing. I went with Apocalypse Robbie, and then he went with RB Operator Secret, and then I was able to respond with kind of mimicking the potential cleave. But right here, you saw how quickly I was able to switch into an anti-cleave, right? I didn't leave myself open to just completely getting obliterated by a cleave or getting completely just cracked wide open, right? Or if he started to tank up, which he could have done, I could have easily switched to a more aggressive draft right here, right? So that's the type of things you want to do when you're a first pick. You don't want to give all your information in this pick because if you do, it's going to be a lot harder for you to counter the 4 units your opponent's going to have, right? You want to try to make those last 2 units be units that your opponent has to respect. And of course, I can give some examples on the opponent's side. Again, he got the A Ravi here as first pick. I responded with 2 units of my own, and then he switched to a nice little cleave right here. And then when he saw me going for the anti-cleave or the contest cleave, he wasn't completely locked because again, he had the A Ravi, and Cerise Caesarea can work in a tank team, right? They don't have to go into a cleave, right? So again, he did a really good job managing his first pick and doing general enough that he can pivot with his last 2 picks. And pivot drafting is a whole thing of its own, where you essentially bait the opponent into countering your playstyle, and then you mess them up. Kind of very similar to what he did here at second pick. Now, on the other hand, how should you be playing the second pick? Well, as a second pick, you have 2 different options. If you're the player that's playing the second pick, you want to get your team core that again is very general, so you can go into different directions depending to what your opponent does, but you also want to take the other priority units. The reason I say this is because that means that you're going to have to pick the units your opponent did not pick, right? So for example, here you did see me pick Fallen Cecilia. He immediately went for Polides in case I wanted to go cleave, and he picked up the Mediator Cowrick to take away another priority unit, right? Right here, he could have also taken Arabi. Arabi Mediator would have likely been better for him in this situation because Arabi Mediator does let him pivot just as well. But that meant that I was able to actually get Arabi on my side of the draft, right? So that's something you have to keep in mind, that if you don't take away the opponent's pick, they'll be able to pick it in the next rotation. So as a second pick, you have to be able to put pressure on these 2 picks, steal away critical picks, as well as set up your team core so that you're not easily countered afterwards. And someone that did a pretty good job with it was right here. You do see me grab the Arabi first, and he does end up grabbing Rimuru and Belian, which are both pretty high priority units, especially Rimuru, right? Because he's really good in a lot of different teams. And the Belian, of course, because he wanted to use mages later on. So again, he went with this first 2 picks initially. And then, of course, I answered with, I overcommitted here as a first pick player. I overcommitted to a playstyle, I overcommitted to an aggro playstyle, and he called the bluff and was able to easily pivot back into an anti-aggro draft and an aggro draft of his own, and I was not able to actually keep up from this point forward, right? So right here, Again, very well job done by the right side to take away priority picks and put a lot of pressure later with the pivot. The other part that you do have to do as a second pick player is going to be the last pick. The last pick has to be something that you want to ban, right? Right here, he picked Polides, which, assuming I keep my Elena, would stop my whole draft, right? So I'm forced to prevent that unit, right? It's a very high pressure draft unit. In this situation, my Riley was a very high pressure unit because with Celia's ban, if he doesn't ban this, I get to kill any unit in the game one shot, right? So that was the high pressure unit that he had to deal with in the situation. Right here, my opponent did not do a good job of putting a pressure pick. He put a crawl. The crawl does not stop my draft at all. There's not a lot of pressure there from that crawl. Did he still win? Yes, the rest of his draft was strong enough to finish off my draft with the stand and the mediator was very strong, but he didn't put enough pressure here with his last pick. He did a very good job early on though by putting a lot of draft pressure by picking 2 priority units that can easily pivot in the draft, and then of course solidifying that team core. The last pick though, it finalized his team, but it didn't apply enough pressure for me to force a ban. And again, this player did put a unit that applied a lot of pressure. This was a really good job. I was caught between banning the Ran or banning the Summer Area, right? Both really good units in their own respect, because if he's able to set up early, I can't do a lot. But of course, he didn't have enough speed threat to actually make me worry, and he had too many units he needed to ban. That's just a completely just outdraft scenario. And let's see if for this one, again, we already showed this one. And for this one, again, the Landy was a very good pressure pick because it's created a situation where I wasn't sure what I wanted to ban. In the scenario, I banned the remove to stop the Rylet. But in the end of the day, when I actually came down to it, the Landy and the mediator were enough to actually take off the rest of my draft, right? So, and it was a very weird line. But again, last pick, usually a pick that completely counters. Right here, it would be a good example. If it was reversed, this again would have been a perfect last pick, right? It's just something that puts a lot of pressure on the draft, forces the opponent to hopefully try to ban, or is the unit's going to be winning you the game. But that's about it for the second pick, right? You're trying to create a good core. You're trying to take away priority units from your opponent, since you get priority to a little bit more units than your opponent does, and you're trying to make high pressure last pick units so the opponent is forced to actually ban it out. That's usually how second plays. Now, the question becomes, is first pick better than second pick? Normally, it comes down to preference. If you're someone that has a very big unit pool, usually second pick is pretty nice, right? Because as a second pick player, you get to pick 2 big priority units. As someone like right here, he could have easily picked a Robian Mediator and had a very good matchup into Celilius. If he's an all first pick, if he has a really good cleave, again, he's able to set up that core with something like a Peyra and a Polides, countering the Celilius, pressuring my draft, and then still being able to pivot later down in the draft, right? So going second benefits a pool that's very big. On the other hand though, first pick, you do get that initial priority to your hero, and you do get 2 units to pivot more aggressively, right? Because your opponent, at the time you're picking these 2 units, your opponent already has 4, right? So you can pivot hard right here and make it impossible for your opponent to counter you with the last pick, right? So first pick has a lot of draft pressure, and that they set the pace with their first pick that forces kind of a response with a team that's going to be used, because usually there's certain units that are better against certain first picks that will give you better team cores against those picks and force more draft pressure. And the first pick is able to set that pace right at the beginning and is able to hard pivot, as I did right here, with a very hard pivot into a cleave draft, right? So as an example for this one, it just shows how strong a first pick can be, because right here in this situation, he probably thought I was going Bruiser, and he committed to a full Bruiser draft. But on the last 2 picks, I went full cleave, and he did not have a single unit that could properly deal with the cleave, except for Polides. And the last pick, Violet would have been a much better last pick in this situation. That would have actually pressured my unit and forced a ban out of me, but he didn't do it, so I had 0 pressure, and I just banned the only unit that potentially had a chance of countering me, right? So that was him not playing the second pick right. This was me playing the first pick right, because I set the pace of the game. He had to put counters to Celilius, he had to set up a team that could potentially beat that, and then I was able to apply a lot of pivot pressure near the end, to the point that the only unit that he had was here, and a Violet, of course, would have been better on his side, but it didn't have a lot of pressure. So overall, which one do I think is better? I personally think this season in particular, first pick is better, just because it sets the tone for the rest of the match right away, and it secures you your most important unit, whether that's a Mediator Cowrick or a Conqueror Lilies, right? Whichever one you're using and you're abusing, that's the unit that you get to secure and make sure the opponent can't take away from you. And in a meta that is so top heavy, with those top units being so important to certain playstyles, you can't really play Bruiser without Celilius or a Mediator, right? And if you're someone that only has one, not the other, or if you have both, but you like one more, having that first pick allows you to secure the draft that you want, right? It just puts so much pressure on the opponent, as well as usually, if you see my bans, a lot of the times, I'm able to ban AOL when I have first pick because I don't have any answers for Celilius. But when the opponent goes second, right, I'm forced to ban Celilius, which means I have to learn how to play against AOL, right? So it also changes your priority in the bans because you're able to, again, pick the unit that you struggle against and be fine on your way. And because of all those things, I really do think that the first pick is going to be stronger. Just the fact that you get to set the pace, secure a strong unit, not have to necessarily ban Celilius or Mediator, depending which one you struggle with, gives you so much command, as well as giving you a very large pivot on your last two picks versus second pick only gets one pivot to actually try to break counter your draft. So overall, I think first pick is going to be better, but again, it doesn't really matter. But that is going to be all that I have for you guys today. Hopefully this is informative and helps you guys draft a little bit better. Essentially, if your first pick, pick a very strong unit first, pick a solid team core that can easily pivot to a different playstyle, and try to win from there with the advantage and the pressure that you force your opponent into a scenario. And a second pick, you want to pick a core that is flexible to deal with your opponent's flexing and to also take away priority units, as you do get two picks, and apply a last pick that is going to apply enough pressure to force the opponent's ban. But that is going to be all I got for you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Peace.